Hello there, this is Al24, the English News edition, coming to you live from Algiers. And to the headlines. Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune receives Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, the father of Qatari Emir. As the Palestinian Foreign Ministry describes the aggression as a dangerous escalation, Zionist forces' latest raid on the city of Jenin resulted in the killing of 5 civilians with dozens injured. United Nations envoy to Libya, Abdullah Batili, describes proposed electoral laws as a step forward, but not enough to allow elections. As Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov accuses Washington of undermining Moscow's stability before its elections, Kiev announces a recovery of 8 towns in the latest counteroffensive. Hello again and welcome. First, in our news, Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune received on Monday Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, the father of Qatari Emir. A statement by the Algerian presidency indicated that the reception was attended by the principal private secretary to the presidency, Nadir Al-Arbawi. Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune also awarded on Monday the Medal of Al-Jadir to the Turkish ambassador in Algeria. According to Algerian presidency, the honoring ceremony came in exchange for what the recently appointed ambassador minister of social affairs in the Turkish government offered of great deeds for the benefit of the two countries over the years of her work in Algeria.
J'ai aussi été très honorée aujourd'hui d'avoir reçu.
Today I was very honored to be awarded the National Order of Merit Jadid by President Abdelmajid Tebboune. It is the first time in the history of Algeria that an ambassador is awarded this medal, and this is evidence on the depth of our brotherhood and friendship and the work that has been embodied. The number of Turkish institutions in Algeria when I came in my capacity as an ambassador was about 900, and I am very happy and proud that today it has increased to 1,560 institutions present in Algeria. Our trade exchanges were $3.3 billion, and today they exceed $5 billion as we aspire to reach $10 billion.
On Monday, Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf discussed with the Sahrawi counterpart Mohamed Saidati developments related to Western Sahara issue at a diplomatic level. According to the Foreign Ministry, the two parties reviewed the prospects for reviving the political process and resuming direct negotiations between the Kingdom of Morocco and Polisario Front with the aim of reaching a political solution that guarantees the right of the Sahrawi people to self-determination in accordance with the relevant resolutions of the African Union and the United Nations. Still with the Western Sahara, Sahrawi activists joined a protest stand in front of the headquarters of the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva in solidarity with political detainees in the prisons of Moroccan occupation. The stand witnessed the participation of international political and human rights figures and large number of foreign solidarity activists from African, European, Asian and American countries, as well as dozens of Sahrawi community members in various European countries.
The time has come. The MINUSO has to observe and decide on these continuous crimes of Morocco that turned cities into prisons during the years of occupation. Sahrawis are imprisoned in unfair conditions without fair trials at all. The time has come for the international community to assume its responsibility at the level of the Security Council and its own mechanisms and organizations such as the United Nations Against Torture.
Coming back to our country, Algeria has allocated $2 billion to cut energy consumption by 10% by 2030. The head of the Algerian National Agency for the Promotion and Rationalization of Energy, Marwan Shaban, said that this money will be used to implement 2023-2030 plan to cut consumption. Zara Farjani in this report.
Algeria is set to launch an ambitious energy control program, the largest of its kind, with a financial allocation reaching almost $2 billion, so as to reduce energy consumption by 10% in 2030. This program is part of the new national strategy, which aims to make smooth energy transition, lessening excessive electrical energy use, and reducing pressure on power plants and electricity distribution networks.
The state has allocated large sums of money to implement the national program for energy control as part of its strategy to rationalize energy consumption and transition, which extends over several stages, including an amount of 260 billion dinars to implement the interim plan that extends from 2023 to 2030, which aims to reduce energy consumption by 10%.
Algeria attempts to implement several daring initiatives targeting households, the largest consumer of energy in the country, and public lighting by introducing renewable energy such as solar system and spreading use of LPG for vehicles.
The program includes several activities and projects which affect housing sector. It also covers transport and industry. This plan contributes to compensating for energy-consuming equipment, on top of which are ACs and heating appliances for citizens and institutions. For the same goes for compensations for public lighting, in addition to replacing vehicle fuel by LPG.
This national plan is also a regional model that substantially reduces various harmful emissions that affect the environment and is a direct cause for global warming. The plan is eco-friendly and makes Algeria meet environment commitment.
And from Algeria to the Middle East, 5 Palestinians were killed and dozens were injured during Zionist military raid into Jenin city using land and aerial attacks. The raid resulted in heavy confrontation which lasted for several hours. Islam Seed in this report.
Dozens of armored vehicles and helicopter gunships flying over. The Zionist forces stormed the city of Jenin, leaving 5 Palestinians dead and dozens injured, with many of them are in critical condition. The large raid triggered heavy confrontation. Sound of gunfire and explosions could be heard around the city, as the clashes remained for long hours before the Zionist forces withdrew after sustaining losses among their soldiers.
The occupation is trying to withdraw for the past few hours, but had to expand the operation. They have had reinforcements, and the fighters from the city and surrounding area, including Nablus and Tulkaram, are coming to support in the battle, and the battle is still ongoing and will not stop.
According to local sources, the Zionist troops broke into some houses and used family members as human shields before detaining 2 Palestinians. The Zionist forces also used bulldozers to destroy water carrier line in the Jabriyat neighborhood and cause power outages in large parts of Jenin camp. Meanwhile, a group of Zionist settlers attacked citizens' vehicles with stones at the entrance to the village on the road between Jenin and Nablus. The occupation military raids were not confined only in Jenin, but several cities across the West Bank have been under Zionist violence, where 14 Palestinians were detained and a number of Palestinians suffocated during confrontation with the occupation forces.
Still in Palestine, the Zionist occupation army withdrew its forces from the city of Jenin after the military operation carried out on Monday, in which 7 of its soldiers were injured and many of its mechanisms were damaged. The occupation army announced that 7 armored military vehicles were damaged during the Jenin operation, while Zionist media reported that an Air Force helicopter was hit by gunfire during this participation in this mission. And just after these latest raids, The Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtaya condemned the crime of the Zionist occupation in Jenin, denouncing the international silence and the double standards that encourage the government of the Zionist entity to practice more killing.
The international silence and double standards encourage this extremist government to practice more killing, destruction and intimidation against our people. As long as the perpetrators and murderers feel impunity, their crimes will not stop. We and our people will confront these attacks, and this occupation must become costly to Israel.
In the African continent, the United Nations envoy to Libya, Abdullah Batili, said on Monday that proposed electoral laws had not determined contentious issues and were not enough to allow elections, as they included disputes over the eligibility of presidential candidates and require to create a new interim government before any vote. Batili, when addressing the United Nations Security Council, said that the proposed electoral laws agreed this month by a committee drawn from Libya's two legislative bodies was an important step forward.
On 6th of June, the committee announced that it had reached agreement on draft laws for presidential and parliamentary elections. We acknowledge the effort of the 6+6 committee as an important step forward, though not sufficient to resolve most contested issues and enable successful elections.
On Monday, German and French Interior Ministers Nancy Faeser and Gérald Darmanin had talks with Tunisian President Kais Saied and their counterpart in Tunisia, a major North African stepping stone for migrants trying to reach Europe at risk of their lives. Saied previously said his country will not become a border guard for Europe, with migrants mainly from sub-Saharan Africa undertaking dangerous sea crossings from Tunisia in unprecedented numbers.
لا يمكن أن تكون حارسة إلا لحدودها.
Tunisia can only be a guard for its borders, and we do not accept being a country of resettlement. Unfortunately, there are some statements from some European officials who refer to an unacceptable settlement policy here. However, the treatment in Tunisia of the poor from the south of the Sahel and the Sahara is better than the treatment they receive in other countries.
A sense of, or rather, France will offer Tunisia 25.8 million euros in order to help it stop boats carrying migrants across the Mediterranean, according to what French Interior Minister said during a visit to Tunis on Monday. Therefore, the money will be paid for equipment and training and comes in addition to 105 million euros European Union package that the EU Commission President announced earlier this month to help Tunisia tackle a big rise in migrant departures.
I came to announce the bilateral aid from France. It's an aid of 25.8 million euros that I announced to the Tunisian Minister of Interior this morning, dedicated to the migration issue.
A sense of cautious calm settled over the Sudanese capital Al-Khartoum as a 3-day ceasefire agreement came into effect on Sunday, and residents finally got to go back to their old routine in peaceful environment. Salma Nasib in this report.
Normal life has partially returned to the streets of the Sudanese capital after the Sudanese armed forces and the rival Rapid Support Forces agreed to a new 72-hour ceasefire plan. Many residents showed up on streets to buy daily necessities, while others were leaving Khartoum for stable surrounding areas. In addition, many eyewitnesses confirmed the familiar sound of warplanes roaring above the capital skies was absent, while the relentless artillery bombardment ceased for the first time in a week.
This ceasefire is quite timely. It gives us a chance to get out of the house and know the situation. Before that, people could only stay at their homes every day. We were unable to go to hospital and workplace.
Since April 15th, violent confrontations between the army and the rapid support forces displayed about 2.2 million individuals, including 1 million children, all seeking emergency food assistance.
We're urgently scaling up, hopefully to support around 6 million people with emergency food assistance and nutrition interventions in the coming 6 months. But the security situation and the access challenges definitely are posing challenges to our operation.
For his part, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres appealed for countries to step up aid pledges for Sudan that nearly reach $1.5 billion, as the conflict between the two rivals has forced 2.2 million people from their homes and sparked a major humanitarian crisis. Meanwhile, during the meeting, Guterres also expressed his concern over the multiple types of violence happening in Jenin.
I am particularly concerned by the ethnic dimension of the violence in Jenin. The scale and speed of Sudan's descent into death and destruction is unprecedented. Without strong international support, Sudan could quickly become a locus of lawlessness, radiating insecurity across the region.
It's worth noting that Germany and Qatar were among the first nations to pledge tens of millions of dollars at the fundraising conference in Geneva on Monday, which was also attended by representatives from Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the African Union and the European Union to help Sudan during its horrendous humanitarian crisis.
In the European continent, 7 civilians, including children, were injured on Monday in the Ukrainian bombing of the town of Valyuki in the Russian Belgorod region. The district governor said that 5 buildings and 4 houses were damaged in the bombing, adding that Ukrainian forces bombed 2 other villages. In the same line of thought, Ukraine said on Monday it had driven Russian forces out of 8 villages in its 2-week-old counteroffensive. Kiev's forces have intensified attacks along 1,000-kilometer front line in recent days and claimed new gains in different areas, while the Russian Defense Ministry said that Kiev forces lost during this counteroffensive 10 times what Russia did. In a related matter, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov accused the West of attempting to destabilize domestic political stability in Russia ahead of planned presidential elections next year.
The vicious practice of interfering in the internal affairs of sovereign countries have not stopped. The forms of this interference vary greatly. They include threats, blackmail, organization of color revolutions. The West tried in vain to repeat a bloody coup d'etat in Belarus 6 years later, after the successful one in Ukraine in 2014. Obviously, they will not stop. They openly set themselves the aim to undermine the internal political stability in our country too, especially within the context of the forthcoming presidential election next year.
Following the first trip an American Secretary of State has taken to China since 2018, Antony Blinken described the 2 days of diplomatic talks as frank, substantive and constructive, while acknowledging the 2 superpowers had profound differences. Sofiane Kajori.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken opened on Monday a second and final day of critical meetings with senior Chinese officials, as the 2 sides expressed willingness to talk but showed little inclination to bend on hardened positions that have sent tensions soaring. For his part, Chinese President Xi Jinping said that both sides reached agreements on some issues that deteriorated the China-U.S. relations, while Antony Blinken described the talks constructive and important, strengthening the 2 nations' ties.
The Chinese side has made our position clear, and the 2 sides agreed to follow through the common understandings President Biden and I had reached in Bali. The 2 sides have also made progress and reached the agreement on some specific issues. This is very good.
Here in Beijing, I had an important conversation with President Xi Jinping, and I had candid, substantive, and constructive discussions with my counterparts, Director Wang Yi and State Councilor Qin Gang. I appreciate the hospitality extended by our hosts. In every meeting, I stress that direct engagement and sustained communication at senior levels is the best way to responsibly manage our differences and ensure that competition does not veer into conflict.
Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, also praised the Chinese initiative to end the Russia-Ukraine war and its intention to be the mediator in the conflict.
I reiterated that we would welcome China playing a constructive role, along with other nations, to work toward a just peace based on the principles of the United Nations Charter.
U.S. Secretary of State also announced during the same press conference that China had renewed promises not to send arms to Russia to fight Ukraine.
What we do have ongoing concerns about, though, are Chinese firms, companies, that may be providing technology that Russia can use to advance its aggression in Ukraine. And we have asked the Chinese government to be very vigilant about that.
Both sides expressed a desire to stabilize ties, despite what one U.S. officials called their profound differences, and agreed that Kim would visit Washington to continue the conversation.
During a press conference, U.S. Secretary of State reaffirmed that his country continues to support the One China principle, noting that he had raised U.S. concerns about what he described as the provocative steps taken by China in the Taiwan Strait.
I raised U.S. concerns, shared by a growing number of countries, about the PRC's provocative actions in the Taiwan Strait, as well as in the South and East China Seas. On Taiwan, I reiterated the long-standing U.S. One China policy. That policy has not changed.
The Algerian Minister of Youth and Sports, Abdulrahman Hamad, supervised the meeting of the Higher Committee for the Arab Games in Ain al-Banyan. The meeting described the draw lots for the various competition specialties, in addition to revealing the official mascot of the Arab sporting event.
We are in the decisive moment, which represents an important turning point in the success of this tournament and requires the involvement of all active parties. This is in response to the lofty goals upon which these Arab Games are based, which will certainly mark a new start and an opportunity for Arab athletes to show their abilities, skills at all levels. Nor can I end this brief speech except with the slogan of the tournament: with sport we rise, and in Algeria we meet.
The Algerian national team held the last training session at the May 19th Stadium in Annaba, east of Algeria, with the participation of all players after the recent victory against Uganda in Cameroon. Head coach Jamal Belmadi seeks through this friendly game to give the newcomers the opportunity to see how ready they are for the upcoming games at Côte d'Ivoire AFCON 2023. For its part, the Tunisian national team, led by its coach Jalal Al Qadri, held the last training session as well in the same stadium of Annaba in a preparation to face the Desert Warriors.
This is a very important game for both teams. We are well aware of the historical background and the level of the games between Algeria and Tunisia. We are so glad to play a game of this level at this particular time for our national team. For sure, there are so many shared points between the two teams, taking into consideration that both squads have already booked their tickets to the coming African Cup of Nations. Almost now both teams have entered direct preparations with a full focus on the African Cup of Nations in the Côte d'Ivoire 2023.
Wishing the best for our national football team to gain another success. To this end, ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much for being with us in this late hour. For more updates, you can follow our social media platform. And all I can say at the end, take care of yourself. Good night.